All right, yesterday was Monday. Well, today is Tuesday. That means yesterday was Monday. That means Pat Narduzzi held his weekly press conference, and certainly there were a lot of things to talk about when we sat down with Narduzzi in the South Side. Well, we sat and he stood and talked about everything going on in the world of Pitt football right now. From Mason Heintschel to Pitt's outstanding freshman class is making a big impact to the win at Florida State, this week's game at Syracuse, the playing service at Acrisure Stadium, James Franklin getting fired. Lots of topics were covered talking with Pat Narduzzi yesterday. I've isolated it down to the top 5 or 6 that I think are most interesting, or at least the ones that I have something to say about. And so let's do it. Let's jump into recapping Pat Narduzzi's press conference from yesterday. What stood out? What do we think? What were some of the most notable things Narduzzi said? We'll break it all down right here on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, look, any conversation about Pitt football this week and probably the next few weeks is inevitably going to start off with a conversation about Mason Heintschel, Pitt's outstanding true freshman quarterback, named quarterback of the week in the ACC yesterday for his performance at Florida State. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. We'll talk about those and Narduzzi's thoughts on those interceptions in a second. But 321 yards, 99 non-sack rushing yards, just an outstanding performance from the young quarterback. And inevitably, not inevitably, but obviously Pat Narduzzi was asked about that yesterday. And, you kind of get to a point where you're like, what else is there to say about Mason Heintschel? Well, here's what Pat Narduzzi had to say about his standout freshman quarterback at his weekly press conference yesterday in the South Side.
He's a competitor. He does a great job leading the offense. He wasn't shaken by the road. He wasn't shaken by throwing a pick. Wasn't shaken by throwing a second pick. He continues to come back. He's just got a swagger about him and a confidence that it doesn't matter. And again, different quarterbacks can come in at different times and they throw a couple picks and it's like, and you see that they don't react well to it, or his face changes to, he gets big eyes or a different look on his face. He didn't have a different look. He had the same look that he had on the first series of the game to the last series of the game, that 4-minute victory offense.
There's a cool, calm demeanor that all successful athletes have. You know what I mean? All successful athletes are able to keep their head and stay calm even when things either aren't going their way or there's a lot of pressure on a situation. I always make examples of guys like Derek Jeter, Tom Brady. Jeter was always calm. You know what I mean? Why did he show up so big in the Major League Baseball playoffs and in the World Series? It's because he was just always calm. Tom Brady was always calm. Those guys just didn't get rattled, and they were able to make plays when the pressure was on and when the situation was tough. And I think when you look at any level of sport, the guys who are able to really excel are the ones who are able to stay calm, stay focused, block out the noise, in the moment and make the play. And inevitably there's going to be some weirdo who's like, oh, Pink is comparing Mason Heintschel to Derek Jeter and Tom Brady. Well, that's not what I'm doing. But I'm talking about there is this trait in really successful athletes at all levels, from high school up to the pros, of guys who are able to stay calm in those situations. And Mason Heintschel looks pretty unrattled right now. I don't think he was really all that rattled by the 2 interceptions that he threw at Florida State, first interceptions of his career, and I don't think it really got to him. And I think there's a few reasons for that, but part of it is how he's made. I just think he is the kind of guy who is going to keep his head. And I think, when you have a quarterback who can do that, who can stay calm, not get too high, not get too low, I think it can rub off on the rest of the team. And this is probably going to be one of my big themes this week, is the impact Mason Heintschel has had on the rest of the team, for what he does on the field, but also how he carries himself on the sideline. I think that has, I think it has an effect, and a positive effect. And I think it has positively impacted Pitt, in these last 2 games. And I think it'll continue to do so. Now, on those interceptions, I didn't have the more I thought about it, the more I looked at it, I didn't really have a huge problem with either one. The first interception was basically an arm punt, pinned Florida State back at the 18. I don't know if that was entirely his intention, but it's not the worst idea to you drop back, 3rd and long, you don't really see what you like. Heave it down the sidelines. Maybe you get an incomplete pass and you end up punting anyway. Maybe it gets picked off down there and you get him back where the punt would probably try and put him anyway. Maybe the receiver makes a play and you get a big play out of it, or maybe, as you'll hear Pat Narduzzi say, maybe you get a pass interference. I didn't hate that interception for that reason. And then the second one, I mean, I think if Kenny Johnson keeps his footing, we're talking about, like, holy cow, the accuracy of Mason Heintschel to thread the needle there between like 3 defenders and get it right to Kenny Johnson, which is, I mean, the ball was going exactly where Kenny Johnson was going. And if he catches it, it's probably a touchdown. And if it's not, he's down at like the 1 or something like that. So I asked Pat Narduzzi about that. I said, like, do you consider those interceptions mistakes? Because, were they bad decisions in your view? Here's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, the first one, the punt, I mean, he took a shot, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Even on that one, if I think it was Blue, right? If Blue goes up and attacks the ball, you probably get a PI on it, but we didn't do a good job. We got to do a better job coaching what we get on that one. And the second one was probably a bad decision. Just throw it away if you don't like what you want, But again, young guys are going to make those mistakes, just trying to make a play. And you got to love his confidence, but we got to protect the football. It cost you a game. And again, that second one was after a block punt, I believe. And, we got a block punt. Wish we would have smothered that ball and put it in the end zone and fell on it. But we didn't get a piece of it. Could have executed that a little bit better. So we did get the whole ball. And but we got no points out of that. So that's we're in field goal range. We got to be smarter with the football.
So maybe trying to force it a little bit on that second interception, maybe, not just taking what's there. You don't like what you see, throw it away, or scramble or whatever. Maybe trying to force it. Narduzzi says, oh, okay. Maybe Mason Heintschel got a little bit aggressive. But one of the things, I talked about it on the postgame show on Saturday night. I think I talked about it on the Morning Pitt yesterday. One of the things that impressed me is both of those interceptions, which were at the end of the first half, were thrown on third down, where Heintschel tried to go for a kill shot or push the ball downfield, when he maybe could have taken something a little bit easier, a little bit closer to him, taking what the defense was allowing him to have. And it was notable then that when they came out in the third quarter, Pitt's first drive, they faced 3rd and 6 pretty quickly right off the bat. And Heintschel on 3rd and 6, the next third down he faced after throwing interceptions on back-to-back third downs, the next third down he faces, he comes out and basically checks it down to Desmond Reed over the middle. Right around the line to gain, just basically threw for a first down, and Desmond Reed turns it into like a 50-yard gain. So maybe there was a lesson learned there. I still think Heintschel's going to take his shots. I think he's going to try and fire the ball and push it and be aggressive if he can. But I think maybe there was a little bit of a lesson learned and played out on the next throw. But that's just my suspicion about it. One of the other things we asked Pat Narduzzi about yesterday was all of his fourth downs, particularly going for it 3 times on the first drive. And the one I was most curious about, like the second 2, okay, you're in Florida State territory. I get why you went for it there. But the first fourth down, 4th and 1 from the Pitt 34 on the game opening drive. Like, that's some video game stuff. Like, that's what I do on, like, Madden or the NCAA college football game. And the announcers, the bot announcers are like, wow, I'm not sure about this decision here. I mean, like, that's what you do in a video game where, like, I refuse to punt on a video game. Well, Pat Narduzzi refused to punt on that first drive. And I asked him, what went into that? Was there a little extra energy, a little extra confidence going into this game? Because that's a risky play, right?
Yeah, it's a risky play. A few years ago at Virginia in the rain, I remember coming out of the tunnel and stepping a foot of water. I think we went for it on 4th and 1 at our own 11-yard line. So, there's risks and rewards. We're not playing to tie the game. I'm not, we play to win. And if we feel good with the matchups and what we have and who we have, we're going to take those chances. So every game's a little bit different.
Yeah, I actually remember the Virginia game he's talking about. It was a Friday night game at Virginia in 2018. Virginia was ranked, and that was, I want to say, like, on the schedule. I don't have the schedule in front, but I mean, that was like after they had beat Duke, and they were building their run to the Coastal Division Championship, and I had to go back and look to remember when this 4th and 1 from the 11 was. They had a 4th and 1 from the 50 on their first drive. They went for it there. Kenny Pickett converted with a scramble or sneak, whatever it might have been, and they ended up scoring a touchdown later that drive. In the second quarter, with the score tied 7-7, Pitt had 4th and 1 from their own 10. He said 11, but officially it was the 10, and they went for it. That's a gutsy call. That might be more gutsy than going for it from your own 34. On the game-opening drive. Here you're in the second quarter. You're still score is tied at 7-7. You go for it on 4th and 1. Kenny Pickett scrambled or ran a sneak or whatever it was and got that 4th down as well. That drive ended up being a punt, so it didn't really matter all that much. But still, I think he might not admit it, and maybe it's not even true, but I think Pat Narduzzi was more aggressive, felt more confident in being aggressive because he had Mason Heintschel out there. I also think he might have wanted to establish a tone right off the bat. You're on the road. You're in this difficult situation. Let's show everybody, the fans, Mike Norvell, Florida State players, and your own players, that you're not afraid. You're not scared of this situation. And you're going to go for it. And you're going to be aggressive, and you're going to play to win this game. You're going to Herm Edwards it. And that's what they did, and they ended up extending the drive, doing it 2 more times on that drive, and getting the touchdown. Pretty impressive stuff. Mason Heintschel obviously having a good season so far, but he's not the only freshman who's making an impact so far. 6 true freshmen have played enough to burn their red shirt, and that doesn't include Mason Heintschel. He's only played 3 games so far, but we can probably assume he's going to play enough to burn that red shirt. Manny Taylor, maybe sort of secretly, unknown to anyone, has played in 4 games already, so he's 1 away from his burning his red shirt. But Ja'Kirian Turner's played 5 games. Trey Bukowski, the kicker's played 6 games. Josh Garrier's played 6 games. Sean Lee has played 6 games. And then Bryce Yates and Tony Kinsler, the 2 wide receivers, have both played 5 games. All those guys have burned their red shirts. It's quite a bit. It's a lot of freshmen to be playing and playing significant roles in contributing. Here's what Pat Narduzzi said about the early returns on the 2025 recruiting class.
I mean, you don't expect that at the beginning. I think we've had a lot of great recruiting classes here and guys that can play. But, Sean Lee's really played well. Mason's obviously played well. I'm trying to think of some of the other true freshmen. Boosie's pretty good too. We saw Boosie in the spring. We thought he could be a factor. Thought he's kind of got that different gear, kind of like a Dez. He's got the ability to break them, and he's shown good burst, and we're happy with where those freshmen are at this point.
I mean, yeah, they've recruited well, but you haven't had this kind of impact from freshmen. You've never had a true freshman quarterback win 2 starts under Pat Narduzzi, right? Kenny Pickett won 1 start as the starter as a true freshman. I don't think you've had a true freshman running back. If you consider what Ja'Kirian Turner's on pace for and where he'll probably end up. I mean, in 2021, Rodney Hammond had a pretty solid season, but in terms of a true freshman, Darren Hall was okay in 2015, but didn't do what Ja'Kirian Turner's doing now and seems likely to do over the course of the next 6 games. Rodney Hammond in 2021, put up good stats, was probably the second leading rusher on that team, I would have to assume. And had some big performances, but I don't think he's going. I think what Ja'Kirian Turner's on pace to do over the next 6 games will eclipse that. You haven't had a true freshman kicker do what Trey Bukowski has been doing, and then Josh Garrier, Sean Lee as a starting true freshman corner and looking like one of their best 2 or 3 corners. You haven't had a true freshman do that. You really defensively, it's been. Jordan Whitehead as a true standout starter on defense over the course of the Narduzzi era, and he's kind of the only one. Sean Lee looks like he's working into that territory. Josh Garrier's having a nice season, and then Yates and Kinsler. I mean, Yates has made some pretty big plays in the in the passing game, and I think Kinsler's been playing a lot on special teams. So I don't know how you compare. I think you have to compare full seasons, but or full careers, excuse me. But in terms of impact as a true freshman, this year's class is they might be setting the bar. They might be setting the bar. I thought one interesting thing from Pat Narduzzi yesterday was, I mean, for as excited as they seemed to be after that game on Saturday, Narduzzi was a little bit harsh about his defense yesterday. Listen to what he said, and this was in the opening comments. Nobody had even asked him about anything yet. This was just his opening statement. Here's what he said about Pitt's defense from that game on Saturday.
Was obviously happier with the offense than I was with how we played defensively. Gave up too many explosives, 6 on the day, and a couple that just didn't need to be done, whether it's pressure, and Taman making a play on the back end. And again, that last play, that last touchdown, not happy, again, probably with the play call as much as anything, but we got to make a play and play the coverage correctly. We didn't play the coverage correctly. We could have been in a different, safer coverage to help our kids out and make them earn it and not, just make them earn it, which is what we kind of talked about on the headphones prior to, and we didn't do a good job there as a staff. So, but happy for our kids. Again, got to make more plays. But overall, you go on the road against a really talented football team, as talented a team as you're going to play against, and we got the win.
Now, yeah, I mean, they gave up 4 touchdowns. They gave up those long passing plays, those long passing touchdowns. They probably gave up more rushing than they wanted. Florida State had 170 rushing yards and certainly looked like they were controlling the line of scrimmage a decent amount, more than Pitt would like them to. But I thought overall Pitt's defense was able to make plays when they needed to. They forced 2 key 3-and-outs in the fourth quarter, led to punts. They got the huge turnover at the beginning of the fourth quarter with the fumble. They, made Florida State go 3-and-out to open the second half after Florida State had taken a 21-14 lead going into halftime. They forced a 3-and-out, and so they didn't let anything kind of carry over. Florida State had a, 7-play, 88-yard drive in about 80 seconds to close the first half. And Pitt comes out in the second half. They don't let Florida State carry that momentum at all. They hold them to a 3-and-out and force a punt. And so I thought, even though they gave up some plays, I thought Pitt's defense was able to come up with some plays of its own when they really needed to. When their backs were against the wall, they made those plays. And they gave up that final touchdown in a 43-second drive, 4 plays, 75 yards that made it a 34-31 game instead of 34-24. And I understand being frustrated with that, and that put the game a little bit more in jeopardy than it needed to be at that point. But overall, I thought Pitt's defense was, I want to say pretty good. I was gonna hedge it to just, they were good enough, but I think they were pretty good. Sometimes other teams make plays too. It's can you make enough plays and make enough stops to give your team a chance to win? And I think that's what Pitt's defense did. Now, if Pitt's offense was sputtering along and could only score 17 points, then obviously Pitt's defense would have given up far more than it should, far more than it was able to, or far more than the game would have permitted. But that wasn't the case. And so I think, they, for being shorthanded, for getting pushed around quite a bit, they were able to step up and make some big plays to ultimately win that game. And they did so with a very limited depth chart at defensive end. And the situation's gotten even worse. They only had 4 available defensive ends for that game, and Zach Crothers is not going to return to help the cause. He got hurt against Louisville, I want to say. And Pat Narduzzi announced yesterday that he's out for the season, as well as reserve cornerback Nigel Maynard. Here's what Narduzzi said about the defensive end depth, about Crothers, and about Maynard.
Ghost has really stepped up a bunch, and the depth is not very good, and that's probably even more impressive, win on the road with 4 defensive ends. I mean, we traveled on the road with 4 guys that could jump in a game, and so the depth wasn't very good, but our guys hung in there. Ghost has done an unbelievable job. And speaking of injuries, I always tell you if somebody's out for the year, Zach Crothers is out for the year, so we won't have him for the remainder of the year, and so is Nigel Maynard. One of our corners that was just starting to get really good. I think the week before he had 27 snaps on special teams. Nigel, he came in, in his spring ball and was playing really, really well. Then in fall camp, he gets a shoulder, and then we got another season-ending injury with him. He was really coming on, and we know Carruthers was as well. You guys could see that in, defensive snaps. But, disappointing to obviously lose both those guys. But next man up, and, there are no free agents. We can't go sign anybody else, at least now. Maybe in 5 years, the transfer portal will be open during the season, and we will be able to. Who knows? But right now, the portal's not open.
Yeah, the portal's not open. Nothing you can do there. No free agent acquisitions you can make. I don't think they'll get to a point where they'll open the portal in the middle of the season. I hope they don't get to that point. But Pitt could certainly use some help. Ideally, I mean, they do have guys on the roster that they could get back. Blaine Spires should be back at some point. I still think there's, I'm still holding out hope that Jaden Moore is going to play this season. I think that will happen. I'm just not sure how soon, and not sure, how much they'll get out of those guys. But even just having them available and getting them on the field, even if you have to ramp them up through like 15 snaps one game, 25 the next game, whatever it might be, anything would help at this point. Anything would help Pitt's defensive end depth because it's in rough shape. Speaking of things being rough shape, Acrisure Stadium. Boy, isn't this all the talk? Since a couple of random Twitter accounts decided to take shots at Pitt and somehow hold Pitt responsible for Chris Boswell twisting an ankle during a field goal on Sunday or something. Acrisure Stadium is a trash surface, and it has been for years. Even in the past few years when it's been pretty good, according to people, it's still like by the time you get to Halloween, between the hashes is all brown. All right, it's a crap surface, and it has been for a long time, basically the last quarter century. But because everybody was talking about it, I had to ask Pat Narduzzi about it. Here's what he said about the grass surface at Acrisure.
I didn't get to see much of the game yesterday. I heard a little bit of the noise, but even before I heard the noise, I kind of went into Coach LaSalle's office. I said, "You see that field?" And for whatever reason, I don't know. I'm not a grounds guy, but I heard some of the noise from yesterday, and I thought the last game was not very good. And I thought it was a little shaky when I walked out there. It just seemed dry. I don't know why. It's a drought. I mean, Mother Nature. I don't know what it was. I know we got sprinkler system out there, but it just seemed really dry. And I caught the last 2 minutes of that Steeler game yesterday, and I was like, holy cow. I went into LaSalle's office and said, hey, it doesn't look very good out there. It doesn't look good. So hopefully we can get that thing back where it needs to be a great surface. We love playing on the grass, so we can't change that.
Yeah, it's grass. Nothing you can do about it. Nobody's going to change that. Steelers insist on keeping it. Whoever runs, they're not going to change the surface. Maybe they can maintain it better. And maybe Chris Boswell almost getting hurt is the inspiration to actually try and take care of your field. But anyway, that was such a big topic yesterday on social media, which doesn't necessarily mean it's really a big topic, but in the world of social media, it is a big topic. So we had to ask Narduzzi about it, and that's what he had to say. All right, it's going to be a great week of talking about Pitt football all week, talking about the offense, talking about the defense, get you ready for Pitt-Syracuse. We've got a lot to discuss, so make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And then what else? Check out Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of the Pitt coverage to get ready for Pitt-Syracuse Saturday night in the Dome. All right, make sure you like and subscribe. Hope your week got off to a great start yesterday. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.